So if you haven't heard, Magic the Gathering during Gen Con this year announced basically its roadmap for sets coming out between now and 2026. It was very, Avengers announcing all of the different stuff coming out vibes. And obviously for this year, we have Wilds of Little Drain and Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Wilds of Little Drain is being stated as the beginning of this saga. And that saga is specifically focusing on the Omenpaths and the lack of sparks being around. The fact that a lot of planeswalkers have lost their sparks. In reality, it's almost that Aftermath, the set that came right after March of Machines, that was the start off of this point where it established a lot of characters lost their planeswalker sparks due to the Phyrexian invasion. These Omen Paths were opened by the tree that allowed the Phyrexians to do their invasion, and the ramifications of all these characters dying during that invasion, and we're now seeing it with Wilds of Eldraine being the first one, this story focusing on Oko's child, as well as Will and Rowan dealing with the ramifications of them losing their sparks. And I do think Kellen is the big hint towards a lot of the different features of what the story is going to be. But we also got more sets. So next we're going to Ixalan. There's a lot of hanging threads on Ixalan, including the fact that Azor is locked there, which has to do with the next set after that. You have Huatli wanting to get back to Saheeli because they have been separated by the paths. It is pretty much hinted that neither of them have their sparks still. Huatli confirmed does not. They're all hunting for something in the middle of the earth in Ixalan. My general prediction is that that thing is going to be the Omenpath to leave. My also guess is that Quintorius, who sparked during the Phyrexian invasion, will be the planeswalker for Lost Caverns of Ixalan, who had just sparked the planeswalk there for the first time and gets to do cool Indiana Jonesing on the Indiana Jones adventure set. But that also brings him up as a second important feature as Strixhaven becomes super relevant as we get towards the future sets that we're talked about. Next, we go back to Ravnica for Murders of Karlov Manor. I really like the idea that this is going to be a murder mystery set. We don't know who was murdered, but someone was. Karlov being Teysa, the not technically leader of the Orzhov, but basically the leader. Now, I'm personally high on the Azor returns at the end of this, and his escape from Ixalan will be relevant to the story. But I'm also excited to see if maybe we get a winter Ravnica, because we've gotten spring, summer, and fall, and we've never gotten a winter one, and a murder mystery seems like a wintry experience to me. And as I mentioned, continuing this fact that Oko is important, we are getting the Oko set with Outlaws of Thunder Junction. There's been a lot of videos I've done specifically about which of these characters are. I believe that is probably now Kellen or Jace, depending on the fact that that's Vraska. We do see one of the other few Peruns with Rakdos here, which brings Peruns being important, which Azor being relevant to the plot with Ixalan and maybe Ravnica is something to do with to me. But I think this is the establishment that Oko is a central character to the story. Kellen setting that up to beginning, Oko gathering a team of people to start a series of crimes to accomplish something really cool. But I think like where in the last two sets, it was the Phyrexians going to different planes, grabbing things to do their evil plan, and it was Nicol Bolas going to different planes, the stealing things to enact his evil plan. Part of me feels like it's going to be, we think Oko is going to different planes, manipulating people to help with an evil plan, but ends up he's the good guy. There's a good plan, maybe. I do think, and I've talked about this a lot, I think this portion of Magic history is going to be very focused on like different factions fighting against each other and organizations. Aftermath set up Nahiri as a major villain source in the sense that she wants to get rid of all planeswalkers and hunt them down. Oko is obviously forming his crime gang. He's Ocean's 11ing. And I'll get to the crime family stuff in a second. Next, we're going to Bloomburrow. I mean, this set sounds like it's going to be very cute. Oko can make sense here because he turns people into deer. He can be like a deer Oko, which I think would be fun. To be honest, on the fact that there better be otter typal decks and support in this set, I don't have strong opinions yet on how this is going to affect the main story without having more info. Though if Jason Vraska aren't involved in Thunder Junction and are on Ixalan, I don't hate the idea that they're just relaxing with a bunch of furry creatures having a good time. One thing I will say is that this is a perfect place for Kellen to end up if he's a continuing main character of the story we're following, as he's from a fairy tale land, and this is a fairy tale land, but, furry creatures. The last set for next year that we're going to be going to is Duskmourn. It's a haunted house. The entire plane is this giant, spooky, possession-based mansion With Bloomborough, I do think that this and Thunder Junction are setting up a different series of places that Oko is trying to steal things, or other organizations are recruiting members to join them for whatever the final conflict in regards to the Omenpaths will be. There is some MacGuffin or object on this plane that a cast member is looking for. That brings us to the first set of 2025. Tennis is what it is being called. And it is a drag race, Fast and the Furious, death race-like experience that's supposed to go over multiple planes. Some new, some old. To me, this screams like the final gathering of the MacGuffins. Now, if Angrath isn't involved and it's not about him protecting his family because he is the Dominic Toretto of this world, then I'll be disappointed. But it's continuing the heist vibes of this arc where characters are stealing stuff, and this may be a race amongst multiple factions, which is often these type of wacky races-esque experiences could be, where it's like we finally have our kind of main set of different groups that we're rooting for, and they're all racing to get a specific MacGuffin needed to continue the story. We then go to Tarkir again, which I'm very excited about because it's been a long time. I think specifically the story here that's been set up is the factions rebuilding themselves against the dragons. I don't think you go back to Tarkir without recreating the Khans of Tarkir factions over the dragon factions. And there was sets up for this both in the original set as well as with the Phyrexian invasion. The Phyrexians doing enough damage and maybe killing a lot of the Elder Dragons to allow this to start happening. It'll be interesting to see which factions are set up in this story. Sarkhan and Narset both have lost their sparks, but how they're dealing with that on this plane. To me, they feel prime characters for someone like Nahiri to start recruiting, but also this kind of feels like the Ixalan of this story, where post Amonkhet and post the Gatewatch losing pretty terribly, this allows you to take a little bit of a break after that big drag race set where this big MacGuffin is finally taken by probably the evil faction, and this is an adjustment to it. And then we're going to space. Volleyball, I don't think we have a name for the plane yet, this is some of the concept for this set. It's meant to be space opera-y, think Star Wars or other ones. I personally am just excited to do space stuff. I think the best part on Affinity was the space theming more than even necessarily anything that the set was doing. And to me, this continues the conversation of like different factions all vying for stuff. Another place famously located, like there are a lot of heists in space. Space heists, very common in media. We then know that we're going to Lorwyn next, which to me is continuing the Kellen, Oko, Fae storyline, and if anything is kind of hinting that maybe this is the Fae world that Oko has some connections to. I also am very interested in what they do differently with Lorwyn. The fact that Lorwyn is so similar to both Eldraine and other fantasy sets that we've hit upon. I want to see what interesting things they can kind of evolve. Are they doing something like Kamigawa and Neon Kamigawa where they've evolved significantly the world and story of what's happening there, or are we kind of going more to a classic Lorwyn? Also, this does bring my big theory that like Oko is trying to take the Great Aurora, the thing that creates Shadowmoor from Lorwyn, and apply it to all of the planes through the Omenpath. This then brings us into 2026, and we know that there are two sets happening there. The first one being the winter set is a return to Strixhaven, and then the second one is the end to the storyline. The least amount of information is there, because obviously even just the name of it could be a spoiler for what's happening. But I think a piece of information that is being forgotten is that Strixhaven is the set leading into it along with Lorwyn. And Strixhaven is very specifically known to being a location of a lot of factions. Liliana is there. Kasmina, a character that has been hinted at as creating groups of planeswalkers or other characters to fight against great evils, is there. Characters established as main characters in the story so far, with Will and Rowan are from there. Having that related to the fact that they have Oko vibes, they do stuff with Oko. Oko is the antagonist of the very first set that their home plane was featured on, and the second time they were major feature characters. They're playing, we went back to Eldraine, Oko's son was a main character. I mentioned Quintorius being a possible character that we see in Ixalan, and him going through the multiverse as possibly a planeswalker since he just gained his spark and we haven't been confirmed if he lost it or not. And Lorwyn being the second largest Fae or important plane that we've gotten makes me feel like that has something to do with what Oko is trying to attempt through all of these storylines, leading Oko to the final story after Ixalan, which is the Falling Set, which we don't know the name of, and will be the conclusion to the Omenpath saga. This to me is a Civil War-like moment where you have each of the different Planeswalker factions established, plus some that maybe I haven't mentioned. So you have the Kasmina groups in the Strixhaven faction. You have whatever Nahiri is doing. You have Oko's crime groups. You have Jason Vreska. You have Tezzeret with his secret organization, all vying for some big final goal. That being said, if you're looking to buy cards from these sets that are super exciting, make sure to check out the link in my bio for the MTG Ambassador Program, and looking forward to see what happens